Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're digging into a new horror flick that's got everyone talking. Don't move.
Yeah, this one is really generating some buzz.
So, before we get into it, just a quick reminder that there might be some spoilers ahead, so proceed with caution.
Right, full disclosure, if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to bookmark this and come back later.
Okay, so don't move. Let's start with the basic premise. It's a bit of a slow burn at first, right?
It is, yeah. We're introduced to Iris, and she's going through a lot emotionally.
Grieving, seeking solace in the woods. Kind of the classic horror movie setup, but it works.
Exactly. And that's where she encounters Richard.
And things go downhill pretty quickly from there. This stranger, Richard, he just screams bad news from the moment he appears on screen.
It's all in the eyes. Those who haven't seen it, picture someone who just gives off an unsettling vibe, and you're in the right ballpark.
Totally. And then, boom, he injects her with something.
A paralytic agent, which I have to say, as a plot device, it's terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. The idea of being completely helpless, unable to move or call for help, it's everyone's nightmare, right?
And that's where the title Don't Move comes in. It's not just a command, it's her reality. She literally can't move. And then the isolation of the setting, it just amplifies the fear.
Speaking of the setting, it's not just your typical run-of-the-mill forest, is it?
Not at all.
Oh,
It
sure.
almost becomes a character itself, oppressive, claustrophobic, even though technically it's this vast open space.
Right. And it's something we see a lot in horror movies,
Mm,
right? Nature, which we usually think of as a source of peace, becomes menacing and threatening.
exactly. It plays on our primal fears of the unknown, of being vulnerable in the face of something much bigger than ourselves.
Okay, so we've got this terrifying premise, but what really elevates Don't Move is the psychological aspect. It's not just about the physical paralysis, right?
Right. It delves into the idea of being powerless, both literally and figuratively.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the themes, let's introduce the characters a bit more because let's face it, the actors in this movie are phenomenal.
Oh, the acting is top notch. We've got Kelsey Asbill playing Iris.
Who, by the way, is fantastic. She really conveys that sense of fear and vulnerability.
She really does. And then we have Finn Whitrock as Richard, who is just unsettling. He plays the creepy stranger role perfectly. And we can't forget Daniel Francis as Dontrell.
Right, Dontrell. So we don't know a lot about him yet, but he seems to be connected to Richard in some way. It's unclear if he is there to help Iris or hurt her.
He's definitely a wild card, which adds another layer of tension to the whole thing. Like, who can Iris trust, if anyone?
And I think that uncertainty, that feeling of not knowing who to trust,
Yeah.
is something that really resonates with audiences today, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's a theme we see reflected in a lot of contemporary anxieties.
And then there's the directing duo Adam Schindler and Brian Netto.
An interesting collaboration, right?
It is. Schindler is known for his thrillers, but this is a bit of a departure for him. And then Netto, who's relatively new to the scene.
It's his first feature film, I believe.
Yeah, you're right. So to see these two come together, it's intriguing.
Definitely. It'll be interesting to see how their styles mesh.
All right, so we've got this isolated setting, a paralyzed protagonist, a creepy stranger, and a wild card character. Where do we go from here?
Well, that's where the real deep dive begins. Because Don't Move is more than just a horror movie. It's a commentary on control, vulnerability, and the things that paralyze us, both literally and figuratively.
And that's what we're going to unpack right after this quick break. So we were talking about how Don't Move really gets under your skin, how it's more than just your average horror flick.
Oh, definitely. It's the kind of film that stays with you, makes you think.
And one of the things that makes it so effective is how it taps into these really primal fears, these anxieties we all share.
Exactly. Like on the surface, it's this terrifying story about a woman paralyzed at the mercy of this creepy stranger.
Right. But then, when you dig a little deeper, it becomes about so much more than that.
It's about control, or rather, the lack of it, which, let's face it, is something we all struggle with in different ways.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Don't Move so relatable, even though the situation Iris finds herself in is thankfully pretty extreme.
Exactly, because we've all felt that sense of helplessness at some point, right?
Right.
That feeling of being trapped, unable to change our circumstances.
Totally. Like when you're stuck in traffic and you're late for something important. Okay, maybe not as intense as being paralyzed in the woods.
Right, different stakes. But that underlying feeling of being powerless, it's something we can all connect with.
And the movie doesn't shy away from showing us the different ways that lack of control can manifest. I mean, we see it with Iris, obviously, on a physical level.
Right, her body literally won't respond to her commands.
But then there's also this psychological aspect to it, right? The way Richard manipulates her, preys on her vulnerabilities.
Exactly. He takes away her sense of agency, her ability to trust her own instincts, which is honestly just as terrifying as the physical paralysis, if not more so.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting. The film doesn't give us all the answers. Like,
Yeah.
we don't know for sure why Richard is doing this.
Right. What's his motivation? Is he just a sadist? Does he have some sort of vendetta against Iris? We're left to wonder.
Which I think adds to the whole unsettling vibe of the movie,
Yeah.
because it forces us to confront that uncertainty, that lack of control, head on. And that's something that I think is particularly relevant today in a world where it feels like there's so much we can't control.
Absolutely. Think about it. The 24/7 news cycle, social media, the constant barrage of information, it can be overwhelming. And it's easy to feel like we're just along for the ride, you know?
Totally. Like we're all just one click away from a total spiral.
Right. And I think that's what Don't Move is getting at in a way. It's holding up a mirror to our own anxieties about the things we can't control, the things that keep us up at night.
It's like the movie is saying, hey, you're not alone in feeling this way.
Exactly. And that, I think, is what makes it so powerful.
So we've talked about the themes of control and vulnerability, but there's also this other layer to Don't Move that I think is worth exploring.
And what's that?
The whole idea of perception versus reality. Because throughout the film, we're questioning what's real and what's not.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, is Iris imagining some of this?
Exactly. Is Richard who he says he is,
Mm.
or is he something else entirely?
Mm.
The film plays with our expectations, keeps us guessing until the very end. And that ambiguity, I think, is part of what makes it so effective.
It's like being trapped in a nightmare where you're not sure if you're awake or dreaming.
Right. And just when you think you've got a handle on things, the rug gets pulled out from under you.
Which, again, circles back to that theme of control or the lack thereof.
It's a wild ride.
It is. But it's a ride worth taking. Because like we said, Don't Move is more than just a horror movie. It's a film that gets under your skin, makes you question your own perceptions, and leaves you thinking long after the credits have rolled.
And that's what we love about a good deep dive.
Absolutely.
So now that we've really unpacked the themes of the film, let's talk about some of the specific scenes and cinematic techniques that the directors used to bring those themes to life.
Let's do it. I've got some thoughts on that.
It's interesting you say that, about confronting our inner demons. Because the film doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of human nature either, does it? I mean, this stranger, Richard, preying on Iris's vulnerability, it's a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't supernatural, they're just human.
It's a chilling reminder for sure. The film seems to be exploring that duality of human nature, the capacity for both incredible good and terrifying evil that exists within us all. Richard could be seen as a symbol of that darkness, of the potential for cruelty that we all have to confront, whether it's in ourselves or in others.
It's like the film is asking, what happens when those darker impulses take control? What happens when we lose sight of our own humanity, our own empathy?
And it's a question without easy answers. The film doesn't offer a simple solution, a magic antidote to the darkness within. It instead presents us with a terrifying scenario and asks us to consider the consequences of inaction, of allowing fear and despair to paralyze us.
So for our listener who's ready to dive into this thriller, what's the biggest takeaway? What's a thought you want to leave them with?
This movie isn't just about a physical struggle for survival. It's about confronting the forces, both internal and external, that threaten to control our lives. It's a reminder that true freedom comes from facing our fears head on and finding the strength to keep moving, even when the world feels like it's closing in.
Don't Move sounds like it's going to stay with you long after the credits roll. It makes you question your own vulnerabilities, your own capacity for darkness and light. It's a film that demands we engage with these uncomfortable truths, and honestly, that's what makes for a truly compelling experience. Until next time on The Deep Dive, keep exploring those deeper questions.